welcome to The Lift. You gotta own it, baby. Woohoo! That's right. You gotta own it. Hello, everybody, and welcome to The Lift. I'm Pat Laurie. So excited to be with you here on this Wednesday. How did you like that opening animation? It actually worked. I tried to do that last week, but sometimes technology doesn't exactly work. And sometimes life doesn't exactly go the way you plan it, right? Well, that's what we're going to be talking about today on The Lift. I have a very special guest who's going to be talking about recalculating. Last year was the year to recalculate, right? Because our lives just changed in so many different ways. But you know what? Now is a great time to recalculate where you want to be in life. What's going on in your job? Well, we have a New York Times bestselling author of Becoming the Boss, New Rules for the Next Generation of Leaders. She has also written the remix, How to Lead and Succeed in the Multi-Generational Workplace, and she really is just the guru for how to succeed in today's ever-changing workplace. I am so happy to bring on Lindsey Pollak. Lindsey, thanks for joining me today.
It's such a pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Oh my gosh. Well, congratulations on the new book, which is coming out in just a matter of days, I think. But I wanted to ask you, why did you want to write the book called Recalculating?
So during the pandemic, like everybody, I was sitting at my desk watching business go out the window and everything sort of fell apart around me and hearing everybody's stories of furloughs and layoffs and business losses. And I had this image in my head of that moment when you're in your car and you're driving and you make a wrong turn and the GPS says recalculating, recalculating. And I kept thinking, everybody is in this same situation. And that's kind of what my brain does as a writer is sort of, what's the theme here? And I pitched it to my publisher, HarperCollins, and they said, yes, write it, do it. And what I did was I started speaking to people. And when I just said that word recalculating, it opened up this flood of thoughts and ideas and strategies and concerns about what kind of recalculating we needed to do, how to do it. And so that's what I wrote the book about.
Wow, that is going to be so helpful for all of us, because I know in the beginning when everything changed, I don't even think some of us could think about recalculating. It was more about like survival, right? And what's going on and how do I even get through it, right?
Absolutely.
So tell me, what do you think is the state of today's worker after going through this pandemic?
I think the state is, for a lot of people, I think there was a period of paralysis in a lot of ways, which really concerned me. One of the stats that I saw that made me write the book was that not only were job postings down because employment was down, but job applications were down. So people were not even trying. And that got me really concerned that people were sort of in a holding pattern. And we saw this in 2008, 2009 as well. I personally went through it after 9/11, living in New York City at the time in 2001, that I thought, I'm not going to do anything. And that was really concerning to me. So I think we've moved out of that. And I think we use that term new normal for a lot of people, where we don't know what to do, but we know we have to do something. And so I'm starting to see people taking action. And I think that's really the way to approach this. I can't guarantee that the step you take is going to be the perfect one, but taking a step is more important than anything.
Yeah, I could totally agree with you there. I think paralysis was something that a lot of us experienced because, let's face it, well, we thought, it was just going to be like a 2-week paralysis, which turned into 11, 12 months. I can't even remember now at this point. But so what happened now after people went through the paralysis? Like, what's going on with our workforce? Do you think like today we're more productive, or have we become complacent?
So it really depends on where you are. One of the statistics that came out really recently was that business starts are up. So a lot of people are trying entrepreneurship. They're trying to start businesses or join the gig economy or freelance or consult. So I think one result is that people are saying, if I can't find a job, I'm going to just start my own business. So that's one direction that we're seeing. Unfortunately, a lot of people have left the workforce. We're seeing this with women, where we're down to the rates of women's workforce participation from the 1980s. So that is a negative negative, but it certainly is a result. When it comes to people inside organizations, the statistics seem to be showing that people are as productive working remotely for those who are able to work remotely, or a little bit more productive. That doesn't mean that we want to do this forever, but I think the big aha moment that we have to take a moment to address is we're not falling apart. Right? The people who are continuing to work are getting things done. And so all the people who said we can never work remotely, this will never work, have kind of been proved wrong. So I think that we're seeing the business can get done in different ways, and we're starting to adjust to that. But the big X factor is if we go back, and if we do, what does that look like? And in some ways, you can't even think about that yet. You have to just look at what's directly in front of you. And the people who are doing that, in my experience, seem to be the ones who are making the most progress.
Ah, okay. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I know. I do think in terms of where the future holds for us in this virtual world, I believe there's like no turning back right now, right? I mean, it's like, okay, we're in virtual and it looks like virtual is here to stay, like it or not, in some form or fashion.
I don't know. It's funny. I thought, oh, well, there'll definitely be a hybrid, right? And the hybrid meant, well, we'll work from home 2 days a week and we'll be in the office 2 days a week. That's probably the hardest of all, because then you get this unequal system that some people are in the office, some people are out of the office. There was some talk of a 3-3-2, 3 days in the office, 3 days out of the office, 2 days at home. There's still
Sounds
significant
like a divorce settlement.
Yeah, right? Yeah, like what's the custody of the office? There's also, I think, a misconception about who wants to go back and who doesn't. A lot of people thought young people would be the least likely to want to go back because they're comfortable with technology. But the statistics and the research are showing they want to go back because work is social. Work is where you meet people and you date and you make friends. So there are all these different factors. And the reality is, I don't want to play the prediction game. We don't know. Nobody could have predicted this pandemic. We can't predict exactly what it's going to look like, but you can probably predict your next 30 days, or even for a lot of us, your next 90 days. So the best you can do as an individual in this situation is to think about what you want this next 30, 60, 90 days to look like.
That is really good advice, because I think if you think too far ahead, that could be uncertain. It could be very challenging. It could be overwhelming to think that. So what can people do today? Like, what are some of the best practices that people can utilize today to be successful in the environment that we're currently in?
So I developed 5 what I call rules for recalculators, and I think they're helpful no matter what stage or type of work you're in. And the first is to embrace creativity. And what that means is you cannot stay the course that you have been on. You have got to think of different ways. So we look at restaurants, right, that are thinking of creative ways to serve meals, or maybe serve people who don't have food right now, or to start tables on the street or delivery services. So they have been thinking creatively. If you are in a job and you want to get promoted or you want to raise, don't immediately say, well, that's not possible. Think creatively. How could I show my value? How can I drum up more business for my company? How can I maybe ask for something that's not money, but also has a value to me? If you're job hunting, how can you be more creative in thinking about different opportunities? Maybe you were only looking at big companies and you should look at smaller companies. Maybe you should expand your search criteria 5 more miles away, or look at remote work in addition to in-person work. So how can you take what you're already doing and just sort of slowly increase the margins on what you feel is possible for you? So that's the first of the rules.
Being creative never hurts. I mean, I love it, because actually what this time has forced me to do is to start a new business. Actually about a year ago, I did my first speech in person. And since then, I've never spoken in person. Like, you're a professional speaker. So how did you get creative with your own professional speaking business?
Well, first, I want to acknowledge that it was absolutely terrifying. I am a professional speaker. That's the majority of my income. And my calendar went blank starting in March. So that was very, very scary. And I don't want to downplay the fear and the trauma that people have been through. I think we need to acknowledge that. Very, very, very quickly, I moved all of my programs to virtual, as everybody did. But I took the time to really learn Zoom, and to really learn all of the tools and the breakout rooms. And, I got much better at sort of watching the chat while I was facilitating, so that I could say to clients, I'm not just making do, I'm actually going to turn this into an asset. And in fact, as a speaker, for those of you who are speakers out there, I really enjoy that right now we're seeing comments come in and that we can talk through the chat, and it adds another element. I feel like an air traffic controller sometimes kind of watching it all.
I know, I'm kind of like going between
yeah, it's a different skill. So I really embrace that. I hired a coach to help me think through the different ways that I can develop my business. Rule number 5 for Recalculators is ask for help. I knew that I knew how to be an in-person speaker, and I needed help to learn how to launch online courses. I wrote the book. I decided to do something. Rule number 3 is control what you can. I could not control that events were being canceled, but I could control my own work ethic and productivity to put more content out into the world. So you have to expand your thinking of what's possible. And look, it's not easy. Sometimes it's not fun. It takes a lot of work. But I think if you look at this and say, well, I'm going to wait it out, and it's going to go back to normal, I think we've all realized that that is not going to be the case. And I think the people who sort of embrace that earlier are going to end up farther ahead, no matter what the future looks like.
Yeah, that is really smart. I love that you said that you hired a coach, because I hired a few coaches over the last year, because you're right. I mean, we can't all be experts at everything, right? So, I mean, I admit I jumped down a few rabbit holes, but it was the discovery process. And, if I wasn't stretching myself, I really wasn't growing this year. And I think, we all can sort of look back over this last year and say, what did we try that's different? And what can we still try that might be a little bit out of our comfort zone? Because we don't know what's going to happen 90 plus days from now, just to be more productive and, to think differently.
Absolutely. And I'm not saying it's easy. I think it's so important to keep going back to this. I am overeating peanut M&Ms and I'm binging Netflix like everybody else. And you're not going to say that I'm here in my perfect bubble. And by the way, if you don't have the funds to hire a coach, I've never seen so much free content in my life with YouTube videos and podcasts and all that. So there are a lot of options to do it. But you have to try different things. And I think you have to think about, what is in my control? And I talk a lot about the growth mindset, which I'm sure you're familiar with, the work of Carol Dweck, that a fixed mindset is saying, well, nothing's going to change, or I'm not good at change, or I can never find a job, or, things are terrible. The word that Dr. Dweck says to add to any of those sentences is the word yet. I'm not good at change yet. I haven't figured out how to thrive in this pandemic yet. Right? I am terrible at remote schooling my daughter. I haven't mastered it yet. Because what that implies is you can get better at anything if you put in the effort. You might not be the world's best at it. You might not make millions of dollars, but you can move forward. And I think, as we've realized, the people who started taking baby steps in March 2020 are in a much better place now than the people who waited for things to go back to normal. And so I think those tiny baby steps every day, someone was sharing with me, they wanted to wake up earlier. And they said, I wake up at 8, don't set your alarm for 5. If you wake up at 8, set your alarm for 7:55, right? And have a baby win. And then over the course of a month, you're going to get up earlier. So I think when you think of it in these tiny little steps, you're going to do a lot better than if you think about the totality of the fact that we're in a pandemic is overwhelming. You have to really chunk it down.
I love that you said that, because, little steps are so important, bite-sized steps, right? Because that's how you can really make change. So when you said, the mindset is everything, right? So I've been reading this book from the Iceman. It just happens to be right here, Wim Hof, the Iceman. And he talks about, changing your mind and resetting your mind. And so he says, take a 30-second shower at the end of your hot shower every day and see what that feels like. So I've been doing that for 2 weeks. And I'd have to tell you, the other day, I didn't even think about it. And I turned the water to cold, and it's like, you can get used to anything, once you try to reset your mind and change that language around in your head. And I think that's so important, is to just make these tiny little incremental steps, and giving that example about waking up at 8 a.m. and then changing it to 5 a.m. You don't have to go extreme, right? Because extreme doesn't work. Like, if you want to try a dry January, that's a lot of pressure, like 60 to 0, 30 to 0. So, make little changes. Now, someone brings up in the comments here, how do you keep from going down rabbit holes while you're trying these different things? Yeah, I can relate to that, because sometimes, we do get tunnel vision, right?
So I'm going to give a counterintuitive answer. And thank you, Christine, for the question. I think you should go down the rabbit holes. Because if you sit there and think, should I go down that rabbit hole? Should I go down the rabbit hole? What if it's a rabbit hole? You're wasting so much time. If you actually take the first step down that rabbit hole, you're going to have a lot more information. So, I was speaking to someone who does coding camps, right? Like computer programming, and everybody's like, I should be a coder now, right? That's how I'm going to be employable in the future. And he said, so many people do that. And they sign up for a $30,000 programming course and they cancel. He said, no, watch a 5-minute YouTube video about coding. So I think go down the rabbit hole, but take a baby step down the rabbit hole, right? Mm-hmm. Don't go and quit your job and start your own business. Read or watch one webinar on how to start a business, right? Take a baby step in that direction. Apply for one job. Don't quit your job. Think about all the different ways you could go down a rabbit hole without absolutely falling headfirst.
Yeah, I love that advice because there's so much value right now on social media and on YouTube. And, people are offering a lot of free advice and free experience. And I have gained a lot from watching many different videos on YouTube and LinkedIn and Facebook. And there's groups that you can get involved in, just to get a taste of it without even spending any money. And the best part about that, I think, is the networking opportunities as well. So let's talk a little bit about networking, because this is a really difficult time for people, or can be a difficult time for people to network when we're just not seeing each other, right?
It's funny. I interviewed someone for the book named Steve Dalton, who wrote a book called The 2-Hour Job Search. He talks a lot about networking, how the vast majority of jobs are, of course, found through the people in your network. And first, I would say you know more people than you think. So when you really think about your friends and your family friends and your children's friends and their parents from the soccer team, and your network is really big. There are studies by psychologists that say the minimum is going to be 150 people that you interact with or have interacted with on a regular basis. And then that has a multiplier effect. But Steve actually said that he thinks it's easier to reach out in the pandemic because we're all so starved for human connection that we want to be in touch with people when you make the first move. And he said something that really shifted my thinking, which is, first of all, what's the worst thing that can happen? Somebody says no, and if you have a site like LinkedIn, which I'm a huge fan of, as I know you are, and here we are on LinkedIn, like nobody's going to be offended if you reach out on LinkedIn. That's the whole point, right? No one's going to say, how dare you try to network with me on LinkedIn? That's why it exists. So there's no fear. It's not like asking somebody out on a date and getting rejected. But the other thing that Steve Dalton said that really spoke to me is he said, ask everybody, because he said, a lot of people are going to say no or ignore you when you reach out. But the people who say yes are going to be inordinately helpful. So that if you ask 10 people and 2 say yes, those 2 people will be more valuable than the other 8 combined. Because when someone does agree to help or to talk or to network or to make introductions, that has so much value that the no's are worth it. And I found that to be so true. It's the 80-20 rule, right? 20% of the people are going to be worth 80% of the value. And so you just have to reach out to enough people to get to those gems.
That's awesome. And you can always tell the people that are interested or the people that just want to sell you something.
You can tell. You can absolutely tell, and trust your gut, right? Only talk to the people. The other thing I would say on it's very hard to ask for help. I think a lot of people, it makes them very nervous or uncomfortable, particularly in the circumstances where we know that so many people are suffering right now. So flip it. Offer help. Say, hey, Pat, I know you have a show. I know you started a business. Let me know if there's anything I can do for you. That's still networking. Right?
It absolutely is. And that's probably, a very easy, a valuable way to offer your skills, right? For someone to say, oh, you know what? That person was really good to me. And people remember things like that, right? What about mentoring?
So mentoring is so critically important, but I think that we miss the mark on how we define it. And I study this a lot. I've done a lot of research on generational differences. And I think that the old school version of mentoring was what we all think of when we say the word, which is you have an older, experienced kind of Yoda-like figure who sort of gives you their wisdom on a mountain, right? And you consume it. And that's great. If you have somebody like that, awesome. I've definitely had mentors in my life, but I think the world moves too fast. And it's very rare now to find somebody who has the exact job or life that you want. It's just, there's so much change, right? And we're not all in one company for 50 years where we can find someone we look up to. So if you have that, great, wonderful. But I think we need to expand it. So I love the idea of micro mentoring, which is, somebody on this LinkedIn Live will get a tip from us, we micro-mentored them, right? And they might micro-mentor us back. When I asked my 9-year-old, how to use TikTok, she's micro-mentoring me. It's a nugget. It's a tweet. It is, hey, Pat, can I pick your brain on something and get a piece of advice, right? So I think you can have mentoring in your life all the time without having this one mentor. I think we get caught up on finding the one who will give us all the wisdom in the world. The other thing I'm a big fan of is what I call the personal board of advisors, which is that instead of finding one person, you sort of have this informal metaphorical team of people that you call on. Maybe somebody helps you whenever you're negotiating. Somebody gives you really good advice on personal branding. Someone has great advice on financial stuff, but it's not all the same person. Just like a corporation has a board of directors that's made up of diverse people, if you have a diverse board of advisors for you, different generations, different races, different professions, different personality types, then you're going to really be more creative in your thinking. Because if everybody I know is an entrepreneur and a white woman living in Connecticut who has her own speaking business, that's not going to expand my thinking. But if I talk to a friend who's a doctor or who lives in Ethiopia or who has been in a corporation for 20 years, now I'm going to start to get some different ideas than I might have gotten myself. So I'm a big fan of expanding the concept of mentoring.
I love that, because I think sometimes when you hear the word mentor, you're like, oh my gosh, that's going to be so much responsibility
So much pressure.
and so much pressure, and I am the guru, and and so that circle of influence in various areas. What a great idea that is. Oh, I think I'm gonna put that one on my list for this week.
I mean, love it.
I have my go-to people, for certain things, but that totally makes sense. I mean, why not have our own board of directors for our own life?
And they don't even have to know. They don't even have to know that they're on your board of directors. And I would say from that idea of asking for help is, whose board are you on? Right? Who are you helping? Who are you supporting? Because I think it really goes in both directions. And that's when you really start to see the value.
Absolutely. Well, I will just put a plug in for the National Speakers Association in Connecticut, because I am on the board of the NSA Connecticut. And it's a fabulous chapter and organization. And it's also just a wonderful time to give back through being on a board. So that is always good advice to give to people. Let me ask you about, what about people that, though, are really kind of in a rut? Because we know that there's a lot of people in a rut out there. It's not all fun and games. I know we can walk out the door and walk our dog whenever we want to because we're sitting at home doing virtual, but there's not a lot of alone time, and there's a lot of stressors at home. So how do you cope?
I'm particularly worried about women. I'm particularly worried about people who live alone. I'm particularly worried about extroverts who are really struggling right now. I think there are just so many people who are in a lot of pain. And I think that the mental health ramifications of this are going to be just enormous. So I feel that pain, and I have very bad days like everybody else. Number one, I think, is you have to feel it and you have to go through it. This past weekend, I will be honest, I ended up at a Wendy's drive-through by myself to get away from my family. And I was eating fries and the biggest Diet Coke you've ever seen in the parking lot, playing on my phone because I just needed to get away. So sometimes you just have to wallow in it. Of course, with the caveat that if you are in trouble and feel a need for support, please get it. I absolutely do therapy as well now virtually with my therapist. So get the help you need, take the time to wallow, but you've got to move forward. And I think it goes back to those baby steps again, which is it can become very overwhelming to think about finding a job or re-entering the workforce or starting a business. So don't do it. Take one step, apply for one job, do one thing.
Well, I think that it's okay that you had the French fries and the big Diet Coke in the parking lot.
It helped. I needed it that day. And the next day I got back on the horse.
I've been personally Instapotting a lot, but it's fun. I think that, we're all human, right? And so we have to sort of cope in the ways that we can cope. But, we're going to stumble, and we're going to have times when we just feel like we can't do it, but you have to kind of keep pressing ahead. I just always keep moving forward and keep pressing ahead and realize that, there is always opportunity. It's just how you're really framing it in your mind. So, I just like to be hopeful, because there's a lot of opportunity to take up new things that you might not have even considered in the beginning. Like, I'm doing the ukulele right now, and I'm teaching myself on YouTube. I'm watching these people on YouTube, and it's so much fun. And I never, I used to think, oh, I could never do this, but I'm taking those bite-sized, moves every single day, but what about for the, well, one of the things that you mentioned though, with work, is that I think that there's even more opportunity right now, because with virtual, the need for virtual assistants, I mean, there's a lot of growth and a lot of job opportunity out there for people that maybe need to build their skills and be a virtual assistant, right? I mean, everybody needs that now.
Yeah, I've actually had a virtual assistant for 5 years, and it's an absolute game changer. There is always opportunity. And I would say you've got to be creative, again, to use that word, in where you find it. It doesn't just mean these jobs of the future that you have to go into artificial intelligence or cloud computing. Everything is going digital. And one of the things I look to is LinkedIn has a hashtag, hiring now, which is all the companies that are hiring now. You can do a lot of research on where the growth is. Don't look to the jobs of tomorrow. Look to the jobs of today. And remember that industries that may not sound like your cup of tea, although you just took a sip of a cup of tea, I realized as I was about to say it, industries that don't seem that exciting are actually full of opportunities. So for example, grocery stores doesn't mean you're working at the checkout. Sometimes it does, but they also have cloud computing jobs, and they have marketing jobs, and they have assistant jobs. Look at industries like manufacturing or insurance that are really promoting themselves as great second or third career choices. I did a gig a couple years ago for the plumbing manufacturers industry, and they're a great choice if you're interested in the environment, because they're working on issues of water conservation, right? It's not about being a plumber. So I think sometimes we write off entire categories of work because they don't seem to appeal to us, when actually there might be really interesting opportunities. And I know a lot of people are down on job boards. Yes, most jobs are found through networking. But years and years ago, when I was just starting out, my first piece of advice to college students who couldn't figure out their career was, I said, get a copy of the Sunday newspaper, which used to have a huge help wanted section, and just flip through and just circle everything that sounds interesting. But I want you to get a sense of the whole board of what's possible. And I think right now we can go to job boards for that, which is you've got to understand all of the different kinds of opportunities. And more often than not, and probably now more than ever, you might end up doing something you've never heard of, right? Because all these things are out there and are possibilities. So don't limit yourself by what you personally know about. You've really got to see what's actually out there. And to your point, there's a lot of opportunity. You just have to be able to find it.
Absolutely. So let's talk a little bit about how is interviewing happening right now during COVID? Is virtual interviewing, how is that going? Any tips for interviewees when they show up for that interview?
My tip is to listen to Pat Laurie, because you are the absolute expert on looking fantastic online. Tip number 3 for recalculators is control what you can. And the reality is, in a virtual interview, which is how interviews are happening, you can control this box. You can control how you look the first time they see you, and first impressions still really matter. So you might have 100 Post-it notes all around with all your answers written out, but you better be looking at the camera and smiling. I love it. You better be looking at the camera and smiling. You can control how you look in that moment. You can control. There are 100 million websites online that say the top 10 interview questions that you're likely to be asked. You can prepare your answers to that. So preparation has always been the key to interviewing. Most companies now with virtual interviews will let you know what the software is in advance so that you can practice and make sure you're comfortable with it. You have got to take control of that situation for this new reality. The content of the interviews is the same. It's just the medium is different, and you have to master the medium.
Oh, what a great soundbite. You are the queen of soundbites. I'm so proud of you. I mean, we met a couple of years ago when you were doing some professional speaking, and your career has just really grown so much. I mean, you've written what? This is your 4th book?
Number 4, yeah.
Wow, congratulations.
Thank you.
And you're in all of the books that you've written have really helped a multi-generational workforce, right? I mean, did you start with a college to career, and then you went on to the millennials? And so, I mean, you have such a keen insight. How do you get that insight into all of those generations?
So I speak to people all the time is the short answer. And I'll be honest, I don't have a PhD, but I read as much as I possibly can, and I love it. And I think part of it is just when you're really passionate about something and want to learn about it, you just kind of consume everything about it. So I think it's kind of the 10,000 hours rule, right? That Malcolm Gladwell said, that I just love it. And I think I feel very fortunate to have come across a career where I want to read everything about it. I want to talk about it all day. We could speak for hours about this, as I know you could. So I think, for a lot of people, the opportunity in the pandemic is finding something that you really love to be part of. And then, it's not just about, I'm not happy every single day, but I'm always interested in what I'm reading and studying. And the books that I write really take my own interest in situation. Like, how am I going to recalculate this pandemic? I'm going to interview people and figure it out. And that's kind of how I get through. So if you can find that for yourself, the process of learning and growing and succeeding and changing over time isn't painful because it's something that you really enjoy.
Great advice. Now, the book is called Recalculating. Where can people find this book, Lindsey?
So the book comes out March 23rd. It's available for pre-order at your favorite bookstore. Plug for your favorite independent small business bookstore if you are so inclined. You can also look at my website, recalculating2021.com. It's part of my broader website, lindseypollak.com.
All right. And I'm writing that in the comments. And having read through the manuscript, wow, you have a lot of amazing tips to offer. Anyone that is really at any phase of professional work right now could benefit from reading your new book. Congratulations, Lindsey. Thank you so much for joining us today on The Lift. And we'll see you again later in the year.
I would love that. Thank you for everything you do, Pat.
Oh boy. Wow. What another great episode of The Lift. I tell you what, if you are struggling with life right now, if you're struggling in business, if you just want to figure out like, how can I, take that next step, right? I hope you tune into The Lift every Wednesday at noon because we do have best-selling authors, thought leaders, we have speakers, people that are really going to help to lift you up because couldn't we all use a lift